Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Welcome to So Many Books, So Little Time. This is show 11, and today we're having a special edition, I guess you could say. In case you don't know our premise, we usually talk about new books. My name is Joe Nash, and I'm here with Zina Shevchik. We're both librarians here at the Colonie Library, and we usually talk about new books from our new bookshelf and new books being processed. But today, what we're doing, we're calling it Staff Picks. Originally, we were going to talk about some of our favorite books from our whole lives, Zina and I, but we've expanded it to the staff, so many people who work here in the library have given us some choices and told us why they like these books, and so we're going to tell you about these. So, as usual, Zina will be going first. Zina.
Okay. All of these titles and authors are going to be listed at the end of this program, but we're also, just to remind you, we also have on our library's webpage, colonie.org/library, is a new book link at the top of the page, and if you click on that, you will get to our blog, and this show has its own blog, So Many Books, So Little Time, and we list all of the books from this show and from previous shows as well. So there's a couple of ways you can find out if you missed the title and authors of some of these books. The first book is a staff member's pick called The Swan Thieves by Elizabeth Kostova. And I haven't read this. It's a relatively new book. We offered to our staff to give us titles of books that were new or old, that they were their favorites. So this is reviewed by one of our librarians who is listening to the audio, but this is her description of the audio book. Dark, disturbing, a good listen for interrupted driving, interesting relationships between characters, the character failings and relationship failings give the reader, listener, something to chew on, to question. How did this happen? Can this come to a good end? It's about a painter who destroys, his name is Robert Oliver, destroys a canvas in the National Gallery of Art. It's fiction, by the way. And it's about a psychiatrist's attempt to figure out why this man did this horrendous thing. And the reviewer says that the author deftly explores the painter's universe with the passion, creative, secrets, and madness. So this is on my list of must-reads. Elizabeth Kostova, The Swan Thieves. We have it in large print, regular print, and audio.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with one of my books. I'll make sure I get one or two of mine in. And I picked this book for two reasons. This book is called Old Friends by Tracy Kidder. Many people who know me could probably have seen this coming. I picked this book for two reasons. One, I would say, when you're a librarian, people are always asking me, can you recommend a good book? This is probably a book I've recommended more than any other down through the years.
You have never mentioned it to me.
And secondly, we have a nonfiction book discussion group here, and this year we just did our 100th book, because we've been doing this for like 9 or 10 years. And this was, if I had to pick my favorite book of the 100 and 102 we've done, it'd be hard to do, but I would probably pick this one. Tracy Kidder, if you know him, I feel him and John McPhee are the two greatest nonfiction writers. John McPhee, way more prolific. But this book, Old Friends, takes place in a nursing home. It's a topic, obviously, a lot of us don't want to think about. And it's about these two guys who circumstances have forced them together, Joe and Lou, and they're not in a nursing home. They're in like the wing where they're still autonomous. They can go out, they can walk around. And Tracy Kidder actually lived with them for a year. That's how he does his research. But he's not a character in the book. He's not there. He just observes. That's how he does all his books, except for one. But anyway, Lou is almost 90, and he's almost blind, but he's totally optimistic. He's totally upbeat. He's totally full of life and everything. He doesn't get ground down by the fact that he's in a nursing home, and he sort of rambles on a lot about some of his older parts of his life. And Joe, the other guy, is just only 72, but because of health problems, he ended up here, and he's just an old grump, complaining. So they get forced together, and the book is really about how they both deal with being in a nursing home, how they really become friends. They both learn from each other. Joe learns more from Lou, though, ultimately, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful book. I just, of all the books we do today, if I recommend a book, this is the one I'm always recommending. Old Friends by Tracy Kidder.
I also love Tracy Kidder, fantastic nonfiction writer.
Yes, he's...
Okay, my next book is recommended by a staff member as well. It's called, and it's nonfiction, The Beak of the Finch, A Story of Evolution in Our Time by Jonathan Weiner. I'll say Weiner. It's a book about, it chronicles a 20-year period in the life of two scientists, Peter and Rosemary Grant from Princeton University, and they spent those 20 years observing finches, birds, on the Daphne Major, which is one of the Galapagos Islands of Charles Darwin fame. And I have to admit that it is an easy read. What I often do with books like this is I read the first chapter and the last chapter and something in between. And I'm not someone to read much science nonfiction, and certainly not science related. The staff member recommends this as a really easy to read and understand description of evolution. And what's different about this is that these two scientists observed evolution in the making, in the here and now, the changes in the finches' beaks. And it might sound dry, but it actually is written really well, and it intersperses their adventures and work with tales of Charles Darwin's adventures as well, and scientific theories. So, The Beak of the Finch by Jonathan Weiner.
I think that book won the Pulitzer Prize. I'm not 100% sure, though. It won some award, the National Book Award, maybe.
Yep.
All right, my next book has been recommended by Anne-Marie Growney. She works in the Youth Services Department. And she is a member of our nonfiction book discussion group. So I've read this one already, too. So I can... This book is called Postville, A Clash of Cultures in Heartland America. And again, when I mentioned my first book, we've done over 100 books, and this book is probably in the top 10. Everyone liked this book a lot. It's about... You may have heard of this. It's been in the news a little bit the last year or two. It's about a group of Hasidic Jews who go to Postville, Iowa, literally right up in the middle of the heartland, as the title says, to start a kosher deli. Now, this group, I forgot the name of the group, but they're like ultra orthodox. They're beyond orthodox. And of course, you can't really see the cover here. It shows a Hasidic Jew reading his prayer book, and all these guys sitting here, with their John Deere hats on and stuff. So the book chronicles how they set up their kosher deli, how that all works, why they do it, and it goes a lot into the Orthodox practices. It's really fascinating. But I think these are, like I say, they're really ultra Orthodox, and then the townspeople, some welcome them because they provide a lot of jobs. Iowa's sort of, has some areas where they lost a lot of jobs. And some resent them because they feel, well, we could be doing this. So it's a lot about the clash. They sometimes get along, they sometimes don't. There were some legal battles, and they were in the news recently because the head of this place, the head of the group, I think they got charged with having illegal immigrants working there, and there was something about not paying taxes. There was something where they were in the news. I'm not sure what the current status is. But Anne Growney, who chose this book, is from Iowa, and she really liked it, and she found the clash, I guess you could say, between people, obviously, where she's from, and this was very fascinating, and it actually is very fascinating. book about America and different ways of doing things. So the author is Stephen G. Bloom. It's called Postville, A Clash of Cultures in Heartland America. Zina?
All right, my next book is a staff pick as well from someone, a staff member in circulation, and it's a departure from what we've been, other titles we've been talking about this morning. This is classified as pirate comic fiction. It's a tiny little book. It's called The Pirates in an Adventure with Scientists by Gideon Defoe. And what got my eye was on the back cover, it says, the author lives in London, he's 28, and he wrote The Pirates to convince a woman to leave her boyfriend for him. She didn't.
I know. I was hoping you were going to read that. That's
So it's a short little book, and I just read the first chapter, and it is hilarious. It's about, obviously it's fiction, and it's about a pirate captain who devises an adventure for his crew because he thinks they're getting lazy and needs some excitement in their lives. So it actually incorporates young Charles Darwin and his ship, the Beagle. And so that kind of just segues nicely. Let's see. He said, the staff member says, it's quick, witty, and humorous. A good vacation book.
okay. Well, that's
The Pirates by Gideon Defoe.
okay. Now,
Joe.
okay, thank you. Now, my next book here I'm going to talk about is one of my all-time favorite books. I mean, it's hard to say favorite with a book like this once I tell you what it's about.
Joe has lots of
But
all-time favorites.
I know, but this book is called The Journals of John Cheever. And if you know anything about John Cheever, you know that he was a wonderful writer, a great American writer, mainly known for short stories. A lot of if you watch Mad Men, that takes place in that era. John Cheever wrote a lot about the commuters in the late 50s, early 60s. He wrote some novels, which are wonderful, but he's really known for his short stories. He's a really unique, and I just love John Cheever. But anyway, he kept journals throughout his whole life, and this is a small excerpt. It's about 400 pages. And if you don't know about John Cheever, he had a lot of demons, and he was an alcoholic. He was a terrible alcoholic. He was bisexual. I think he didn't even come out until he may have been in his 50s or 60s, so he struggled with that his whole life. And he was always thought he wasn't considered a great American writer like the others, and so he had some demons, but a wonderful writer. But anyway, the journals, and I guess as it turns out now, he was probably terribly manic depressive, so because this book really goes back and forth, the ups and downs. There's parts that are so euphoric and parts that are so despairing, you just can't believe it. And the reason I'm saying that is because it's absolutely beautifully written, whether he's really, really happy or really, really sad. It's beautifully written, and it's really heartbreaking at parts, and a lot of it is. But it's just a wonderful book, and I was going to say one other thing about it. Oh, yes. I would recommend, if you're going to read this book, you can't just sit down and read it all the way through like you'd read a regular book. The book is so emotionally overwhelming, you just can't do it. You'll be depressed, I think. But it's beautifully written. The way I read it, the way that might be a good way to read it, I read it, I think, in the mornings. I had a cup of coffee or two, and I read it for about an hour, for about 3 weeks in a row.
I'm not sure. Is that a good way to start a day?
Well, it isn't all depressing.
Okay.
But the reason it's so well written, but you don't read it all the way through. It's emotionally overwhelming, but it's a really amazing book into the heart of someone that is trying to do the best they can as a human being, and it's a great book. The Journals of John Cheever, edited by Robert Gottlieb, I believe. The entire journal was millions of words long. He fleshed it out down to about 400 pages, and there's a great introduction by one of his sons, and a great book. So, Zina?
Okay. This is one of my favorite books of all time, John Irving's The World According to Garp. I haven't read it again, and I'm going to do that, my beach reading this summer. It's just something that stood out in my mind, this title. When people ask me, some of my favorite books, this is the one that I talk about. And in the rereading, I'm probably going to find out why. Well, I do know why. It was an emotional time in my life when I read it, and it just struck me as being totally different from anything else I'd ever read. Irving's characters are really very bizarre, and the situations they're in are humorous and unlikely, but the characters are, you really connect to them, and it won prizes, and it was his breakthrough novel, John Irving, and they made a movie out of it that I don't think the movie won Academy Awards, but the actors won Academy Awards for it. And I've actually never seen the movie because I didn't want to ruin the book for myself. But we have the movie in stock too, if people want to approach it that way. But I highly recommend John Irving. I also enjoyed Widow for 1 Year, which he wrote quite a bit later. And I enjoy all his writing. And as I said, the characters are unusual, the situations are unusual, and it's always very unexpected, and everything has a lot of emotional impact because of the circumstances being so unusual and so bizarre. He's written Hotel New Hampshire, Cider House Rules, which was made into a movie, and what's the Prayer for Owen Meany?
Prayer for Owen Meany,
that
yes.
Joe recommends, and I have never actually read. That's on my list too. So John Irving, World According to Garp.
Okay, I just heard an interview with him yesterday, and he mentioned one of the things he writes about a lot is his fears. He writes about things that he hopes will never happen to him. So
that's good. So John Cheever's a New Englander too.
Yes, John Cheever.
John Irving is a...
Well, John Cheever lived down in Ossining. He's from the Hudson Valley area.
And Irving was from New Hampshire, went to school in New Hampshire.
Yes, he's more New Englandish.
Right.
Now, my first book I talked about was Old Friends by Tracy Kidder, and I was saying how I'm always recommending that book. Well, here's a book that our teen room librarian, Maureen DeLauder, is always talking about and always recommending to people. I haven't read it yet, but it's a book I would like to. Came out in the early 90s. It's called The Magic Bus, An American Odyssey by Douglas Brinkley. When what he did, I think he was a college teacher. I mean, he might still be there. This book came out, like I say, in 1993. He took 17 students in a bus across America for an American history class, and I think they studied works of literature like Walt Whitman and Jack Kerouac.
So this is a nonfiction book.
Yes, it's a nonfiction book. And they go everywhere, Thomas Wolfe, and they go to New Orleans and Seattle, and they go to Missouri. They go all over America. In fact, you probably doesn't see it. If you can see the map of America, if you remember the book Blue Highways by William Least Heatmoon, the route looks very similar, but I don't know if they went on all back roads or they probably went more on highways, but they went to all places that I think that you could say are uniquely American, I guess, which is obviously everywhere, but they try to go to, like I say, Thomas Wolfe's South. They go on Route 66 with Jack Kerouac. They try to go on the Walt Whitman's poem, The Open Road. They go down the Coast Highway. They go to the Midwest. They go to Denver. They go to New Orleans, and they're studying history and literature, but they actually go to the places. So it's really, and Maureen has said that she just loves this book to no end. She's always recommended it. I think she may have read it a few times. And to give you a flavor, this may help you out. It's kind of a post-hippie kind of book, I guess you could say. But the book is dedicated. This might give you an idea of what you're in for, I guess. It says, dedicated to the memories of Jack Kerouac, Thomas Wolfe, Stephen Foster, Miles Davis, and Robert Kennedy. So I think you might get a flavor of. But Maureen loves this book to no end, and it gets kind of long, but it looks really good. And there's great reviews on Amazon from some of his former students. So, and they go to San Francisco, they go everywhere. So, The Magic Bus, An American Odyssey by Douglas Brinkley.
My next couple of titles are a departure from the more literary genres we've been talking about. When we asked our staff members to give us picks, we didn't put any boundaries on what they could recommend to us. And I was excited. I was pleased to see that someone actually recommended the Stephanie Meyer Twilight books. because I read them I read Twilight when it first came out because everybody was requesting them. They weren't just teenagers who were requesting them, they were adults. And I enjoyed this Twilight very much. And I think the characters, even though it's about vampires, of course you'd have to be living under a rock if you didn't know about Twilight and Stephanie Meyer right now. But I really enjoyed the characters, and mostly the staff member who recommended this says that it's an awesome romance with a moral and ethical twist from days gone by, and action with a peaceful outcome. And I have to agree with that. You know, it's I think the characters are well developed, and there's enough adventure to keep everybody interested. So in my opinion, the other books didn't, are good, but they don't quite reach the level that this first book did. And that same staff member recommended for escape entertainment, Christine Feehan, the Ghost Walker books. This is science fiction, hybrid, not the kind of thing that I read, but she said they're totally engrossing and great romance and escapist reading. Christine Feehan, the Ghost Walker books.
That book has many in a series, I think.
She writes several series, I found out, Christine Feehan. And this Ghost Walker series, it's about 5, 6, 7
that's
of
what
them.
I thought.
So there's a new one out, and I don't have the new one with me. But the two I have are Predatory Game and Murder Game. Looks like game is in the title for the Ghost Walker.
I think they somehow combine espionage or something.
There's all kinds of it's kind of a mystery adventure, but besides they have the characters
like special
have
ops people?
various have various unusual abilities, ESP and that kind of psychokinetic. What do you call it? Psychokinetic, being able to move objects and that kind of thing. So it's something new to try.
All right, I'm going to do one of my books now again, so I can go back and forth. This is really a fascinating book, really a great book. It came out in 2005. It is called, it's too bad you can't see the cover of this. Well, I'll hold it up, but it's called Moon Dust, In Search of the Men Who Fell to Earth. And what this book is, the author, his name is, let's get sideways, Andrew Smith. In early 2003 or 4 or so, he interviewed, there was 9 men still alive who actually walked on the moon. And he interviewed them all except Neil Armstrong. And Neil Armstrong has never given interviews, so that really wasn't unexpected. So he interviewed all 9 who were still alive. I'm sorry, he writes about Neil Armstrong, but he didn't interview him, but he interviewed the rest. The covers, they look like baseball cards. Gene Cernan, with a little asterisk, last man on the moon, John Young, the longest surviving astronaut. So they're like baseball cards. But anyway, he ended up interviewing all the guys that walked on the moon: Alan Bean, Jack Schmitt, Charlie Duke, James Irwin, John Young, Gene Cernan, Buzz Aldrin. Armstrong's on here. But it is absolutely fascinating because of what happened up there and when they came back and how it affected the rest of their life, how they thought about life and religion. Some thought about religion, some didn't. And how they had to deal with coming back. And the other reason I really liked it is the author is around my age, so he was like me in the mid-'60s. I remember watching all those, particularly the Gemini. I loved watching those, and they used to cover them nonstop, I think. And I particularly remember the Christmas Eve one when they circled the moon. They didn't land on the moon, but that was one of the first time the Earth was seen away. But anyway, it's fascinating. And what happens to some of these guys, let me just read you something from the, what it says in the jacket here from some of the men. Some of the astronauts traded on past glories, others tried to move on, some found God, some sought oblivion, some reinvented themselves, and some discovered a measure of happiness in a completely unexpected place. One of the astronauts became a kind of a famous painter. Some kind of got new agey. Some still worked for NASA and tried to promote space flight and keep on doing it. So it's absolutely fascinating. There's one great scene in here, or one of many, where the author goes to it's like a science fiction convention or a Star Trek thing or something, and he looks over on this table a little card table, and here's the guy, I forgot which one it was, he was signing autographs for like $10, and you can go talk to him. And no one was at his table, and the author's like, here's a guy who walked on the moon, and no one's... And the book is also a cultural history of America from 50s and 60s into the 70s and 80s when flight wasn't a priority anymore, and how all these guys adjusted and how it affected them is really interesting. And there's one interesting thing too is on the way in the Apollo seats, for some weird reason, I forgot what it was, either left or the right, the guy that was in either the left or the right, but there was the same seat, those guys became, when they came back, became sort of the mystical, spiritual ones. Kind of strange, but they were in the same seat. It was kind of strange, but it's really interesting the journeys these men took, not only to the moon, but their journeys back on Earth. So, Moon Dust, In Search of the Men Who Fell to Earth by Andrew Smith, a really fascinating book. Zina?
Okay, my next title is, well, it's a series of books that I really enjoy, and I look for forward to a new title by this author. And again, many of you may be familiar with him, Alexander McCall Smith. He writes number one ladies detective agency, mystery, comedy kind of books about a lady detective in Botswana, I believe. But I don't read those books. I read these. This came out, I think, in the 1990s, this very first of the series, The Sunday Philosophy Club. It's set in Edinburgh, Scotland, and the main character is Isabel. And she is something unusual. She's the editor of a philosophical journal, an academic's philosophical journal. So the book follows her life and all the little characters in her life. And it really portrays Edinburgh in a delightful light. Makes me certainly want to go and visit Edinburgh in Scotland. But it's a kind of a feel-good kind of read. She's a philosopher, academic, so her musings, the book is in her voice and her just thoughts and musings as she goes about her daily, relatively routine life. And there's been at least 5. The most current one is The Lost Art of Gratitude, that's out now, and I really, really enjoy these books. He also has another series called 44 Scotland Street, and it as well is set in Edinburgh, and it follows the lives of the quirky characters who live in this apartment building in Edinburgh, 44 Scotland Street. And he has a series of books that follow this first one, following the lives of these quirky characters. And again, they're good, feel-good kind of books, lovely characters. I think, like, if you like Jan Caron as Karen,
Jan Caron.
Those books, you would really enjoy these. So I recommend Alexander McCall Smith, Sunday Philosophy Club series, and 44 Scotland Street series.
But his most famous series is The Number One Ladies Detective, but you don't.
Right.
You
No,
don't like that?
I don't know why. And I'm a mystery reader, but those didn't. And I've only tried a couple, but they haven't appealed to me.
Okay, here's a book recommended by one of our staff, Jessica, who works down in circulation. It's called Animal Vegetable Miracle, A Year of Food Life by Barbara Kingsolver. Now, most of you might know Barbara Kingsolver's name as a novel. She writes very famous novels, Poisonwood Bible. I can't think of her other ones now. But she was actually trained as a biologist, so she started out as a scientist. This book got a lot of, when did this book come out? This book came out in 2007, 2008. When this book came out, it was on the bestseller list, I think, for a year. It had a lot of buzz around it, and Barbara Kingsolver and her family moved from Tucson, Arizona to Virginia, and the premise of the book is, because the subtitle is A Year of Food Life, they tried to live growing their own food for a year, and if they couldn't grow it, it was going to be locally, I don't know, within 50 miles. They try to, it's kind of like a Michael Pollan a little bit. But anyway, the book is about her life, her family, growing their own food. There's some recipes in here that Jessica said were really good, and it's a lot about the food industry, why she decided to do this, and don't forget she's trained as a scientist. And Jessica said that the reason she really liked the book is that it really made her seriously rethink the importance of food and locally grown food and maybe, I don't know if she said organic, but maybe not as processed. And she also said that this book made her realize the importance of the seasons. The book kind of follows the seasons. It starts in March and ends in March, and the importance of eating sort of in tune with the season. So she really liked it, and this, like I say, this book was on the bestseller list for over a year, and it got it. A lot of people were talking about it when it was out. Animal Vegetable Miracle: A Year of Food Life, Barbara Kingsolver. Zina?
Okay, for some reason I don't have the book here. Girl in Translation by Jean Kwok. This is a staff member's suggestion. It's a new book. She calls it an eye-opening fictionalized expose of the immigrant existence in Chinatown. A young Chinese girl and her widowed mother survive family and work in a sweatshop and the education system in the USA. Empowering and shocking. Girl in Translation by Jean Kwok, Kwok, if I have this correct. It'll be on our blog. And
Is that a new book?
it's a new book,
mean,
I believe.
Is that Chinatown in the sweatshops today, or like 50 years ago?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. I don't have that information.
Do they still have sweatshops? They probably do.
Probably. Well, I don't know. Maybe it says an expose. Let's see. Young immigrant. Doesn't give me any clue.
Okay.
I'm guessing it's history,
All right,
historical novel. So I'm done with my my staff picks.
Okay, we might go a little bit longer than normal. I'm gonna do one or two more. This was also recommended by Maureen DeLauder, our teen librarian, and it's also a book our nonfiction book group did, which I really liked, but people in our group really didn't. But Maureen really loves this book again. It's called Blue Latitudes: Boldly Going Where Captain Cook Has Gone Before, by Tony Horowitz. Tony Horowitz is a very funny writer. He's serious, but he can be very funny. He's the author of Confederates in the Attic, if you know that book. And what he did, this book came out this was an older book, 2002. He retraced, if you remember, Captain Cook was one of the first guys to go around the world. He took 3 different voyages. And Tony Horowitz followed his sort of original routes that Captain Cook took. And so it's a travel book. And he goes into the history of Captain Cook. He uses excerpts from Captain Cook's diaries and logs. And Tony Horowitz comments about how the world has changed since then. Even like, they're out in the Fiji Islands somewhere, and he talks about even modern technology has impinged on, all these little out-of-the-way places. So he tries to retrace his route. He does part of it in a ship, just like Cook. And he talks about being, and unbelievably hard work, pulling the sails and sleeping in the hammocks. He did it for like 2 or 3 weeks, and he goes, I don't know how they could have done this for years.
Well, that's why they didn't live long. That's why we have long lives.
But they literally go all over the world. Like I say, they retrace, and he goes back to England and goes to where some of Cook. So it goes back and forth between Cook's journeys, because he's always quoting Cook's journeys, Cook's actual writings, and then Tony Horowitz and one of his buddies hangs out with him a lot of it, and how the world has changed and stuff like that. So a great travel book. Maureen really recommended it. She really liked it, and I liked it a lot too. Blue Latitudes. So you have no more?
I have no more. I want to do the staff picks, if that's...
All right, I'll do one more quick one, because I noticed I didn't pick too much fiction.
Ooh, you have the Uncle Tungsten. That's it.
We'll have to do another staff pick
we'll
show. Maybe every 5 shows we'll do a staff pick. I picked this book. I had to bring my own copy from home.
Ooh, I love that too.
Because our book is checked out.
All right.
It's an old classic from 1974. It's called Watership Down, an absolutely epic novel about rabbits. Most of you probably might know this book.
It's not about rabbits.
Well, it's about rabbits, but it's not about rabbits, yes. It's about this little group of rabbits who are searching for home, and they go on this absolutely epic journey. The rabbits have their own mythology, their own cosmology. They have this little ragtag band. It's a typical sort of journey.
I'm so excited you picked that, because that's like one of my favorites too, but I forgot all about it.
When I read this book, you usually have those I cannot put it down experience when you're younger, but I remember reading this as an adult, and I literally could not put this book down.
Yeah, I read it as an adult.
And it's about, like I say, it's about rabbits, and they're going on a journey. Somehow they get kicked out. I forgot, I read it a while ago, but they have to leave their warren. And they got the leader, and they sort of go out on this journey. And I think they don't really go, but it's over in the downs of in England. And each each chapter has a little epigraph, from Shakespeare, from Aeschylus, and it's very serious. But the little ragtag band, and they just do the typical things on like the hero's journey. I'm thinking of Richard, who's the Campbell guy with the mythology stuff. But it's
Joseph Campbell, yeah.
Joseph Campbell. It really follows the hero's journey, and the unlikely one becomes the hero, and they have the battles with the other it's just epic.
Yeah. So we both recommend it.
So Watership Down by Richard Adams, an oldie from 1974.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, that's it for our staff picks. We'll be back with our regular show talking about new books, but I think we'll do this again, Zina.
I think that's a good idea, Joe.
Okay, and so we'll see you next time, and on So Many Books, So Little Time.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.